now about how we should be talking with our kids about the coronavirus and the challenges facing our country over the next days and indeed weeks. We're joined on the line by educational psychologist Professor Irma Eloff, just to pick her brain a bit for some tips. Irma, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we've heard from some kids there. Like I said, they're mostly kids of people in the media, journalists as well. So perhaps some would say there's perhaps overkill in information. But by and large, most of those kids, except maybe the few at the end who said everybody should just chill and treat it like the flu, most of them were really on top of what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. In your opinion, how should we be talking with our kids about this so that we could bring across the seriousness of it, but not causing undue anxiety and panic?
The most important message from the parents and adults in the life of children is the atmosphere that we're creating. In a home, our lives have shrunk to a much smaller space for most of us. And I think children respond to the atmosphere and the levels of anxiety and or calm that they find. And from the children that just spoken, you can clearly see that there are adults who are giving them accurate information, which is very important because there's also inaccurate information out there. So I think that the dual responsibility of creating a calm and focused and balanced atmosphere, and then also focusing on correct information to the children.
How important are the words that we use, the language that we use, and the tone in which we speak with the children, and obviously not speaking at them, because we're always being told that that is not the right way to do it?
It's extremely important. Children respond best in an atmosphere where they feel safe. And it's important as adults to point out to the people who are doing things right within the middle of this pandemic, not only to the things that's being done wrong. And it's also important to use the resources that's out there. There are some fantastic things that's being developed as we speak that provide accurate information to the children.
I spoke to a clinical psychologist yesterday about how adults should be dealing with the feelings of anxiety that they may be facing, not knowing what lies ahead. How should adults try and manage their own anxiety so as not to pass that on to the children at this time?
Well, we should think about this long term. This is not something that will be over in a week or two's time. This is a long-term strategy, and we should structure our days in the same way that we structure our lives otherwise. There should be times for leisure, there should be time for getting things done, and there should be time for spending meals together. So in terms of how we manage our anxiety, it's very important for us as adults. But it's also important to think of it not only for today, but in the medium to long term.
How important is it for us to manage? As adults, we are told repeatedly during this time, especially, we need to manage the time that we spend on social media, perhaps, and taking in only the information that we need at that time. How important is it to manage the media that kids are being exposed to at this time?
Very important. Fortunately, a crisis has a way of bringing out the very best in humanity. So time spent on social media is not only negative, it's also a source of information and a source of positive stories of things that people are doing that's resourceful, that's creative, where they are trying to make the best of their time together.
What should parents be looking out for? If perhaps they've got kids that maybe aren't as verbal as some of those kids we've just heard from now, what should they be looking out for in terms of behavior, things being said by children during this time to make sure that they are on top of ensuring their kids stay as calm as possible?
It's the same as during other times. You should look out at sleeping patterns not being disrupted, appetites being affected. If the amount of questions that a child asks goes up significantly, that might be indicators of anxiety in a child. And then it will be important to provide the necessary support and the information that might calm them down.
Through social media, we're seeing various posts from parents coming to grips with the fact that they now have to be teacher, nanny, and parent to their kids at this time. And like you mentioned earlier, stuck in smaller spaces as usual. And one friend of mine who's got kids said that she feels like her relationship with her kids is going to be totally different now going forward, because they need to be everything to them. How could you possibly manage all of those different roles to ensure that that specific family unit gets to the other side in one piece?
Boundaries will be very important. I mentioned structure to a day earlier. It's important that there are still family time, because when we are all together in the same space, things can easily blur into different zones. So I think putting structure to the day, creating the boundaries, now is the time for learning, using the online resources that's available, and even perhaps moving the learning phases of the day to a particular part of the house or the home, so that there's a designated space for learning activities and then other spaces for family time. The demands to parents of suddenly having to share the responsibilities for the learning of their children throughout the day is significant. We've seen the jokes going around, but it is in actual fact a very serious demand that is being put to parents. So I think it's important to use the mechanisms that we have in the outside world, and then make it applicable in our smaller home environments in the coming weeks.
Just one question before I let you go. The other query that's risen is that some kids perhaps don't have siblings, or they live in communities where kids in the neighborhood still play with each other in the street outside, and it's more of a community-based raising of their kids. That kind of interaction is now being discouraged. I suppose parents needing to pay attention to making time to actually play with their kids, because they can't play with other kids, will also now be important.
Yes, both being outside and also connecting with people via social media, where we can physically see each other now. I know everyone doesn't have access to significant data, but it's important to retain those social connections and to spend time outside, but keeping the social distance at a safe space.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Some really practical tips there from educational psychologist Professor Irma Eloff. Thank you so much.